satirical, the unmistakable style of Bob Fosse. In a 40-year career, Bob Fosse danced, choreographed, and directed for movies, television, and theater. In 1973, he became the only director ever to win the Triple Crown, a Tony Award for the show Pippin, an Emmy for the TV special Liza with a Z, and an Oscar for the film Cabaret. In 1987, on his way to the theater to check out a revival of his hit show Sweet Charity, Bob Fosse suffered the last of many heart attacks and died. Now a new musical, FOSSE, Celebration in Song and Dance, takes us on a journey through Bob Fosse's imaginative world. A company of 36 dancers perform some of his greatest works. The show includes recognized Fosse classics and discoveries from his early years, as well as numbers from television and film never before seen on a stage.
You know, Bob always said there's no law against smiling. Don't make the audience, like, don't flirt with them. Make them come to you.
Gwen Verdon understands the Fosse style better than anyone. She was Bob Fosse's third wife and favorite leading lady. She could do it all, dance, sing, and act.
Creation was truly enormous. It was not just dance steps off the top of his head. It was a whole picture.
Make my bed and light the light. I'll be home late tonight. Leave the perch and take the shine. Toodaloo, farewell, bye-bye. Blackbird, go take a fly, little blackbird, bye.
Everybody thinks Fosse was a lot of bumping and grinding and sex, which it's not. There's a lot of subtleties, there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of double entendre.
Nicole Fosse is the daughter of Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon. She initiated this project along with her mother.
Fosse was very sensitive, very emotional, very sentimental, very family-oriented, very shy, an incredible gentleman. And then there's the other side, that he just loved to have a good time and go out dancing and whoop it up. He was a mixture of everything.
Anne Reinking, a celebrated Fosse dancer, one-time companion, and one of the stars of his pseudo-autobiographical film All That Jazz, is also committed to preserving Fosse's work.
Through dance and song, Mr. Fosse has touched upon so many emotions, big ones, little ones, all ones in between, and he gave them equal importance.
I wanna be free as any bird can be. Yes, sirree. I wanna leave my footsteps on the sands of time. If I never leave a dime, I'll dance alone with footsteps on the sands of rhythm and
Bob Fosse lived his life in the theater. That's where he came alive. And he used the language of vaudeville, of entertainment, as a metaphor for life. No one else did it quite as extraordinarily as he did it.
You can see Mr. Fosse and see he's terribly influenced by vaudeville. He really loves ballet, loved Balanchine. but loved Fred Astaire and hoofing and the great vaudevillians, and all of that is in his work. And it's right up front and right up center and done with great pride. Okay, good. Would you have time to get back around the other side? Barely. Yeah. Okay, let's go to where you come in. Let's just see what you guys do.
There isn't any dancing in the world that is quite so sexy as being in any Bob Fosse number. He learned from everybody. He learned from Jack Cole. Isolation, that thing, one shoulder, the arm, the hip, only that thing moves.
And that sentimental favorite, World War I.
I don't think he set out to do this, but he developed a real distinct style and a real way of dancing, and it was real jazz, but it was refined and fluid and tastefully done. A bump never was a grinding bump or a rude bump. It was always a dainty bump.
His dancing was meant to be humorous, irreverent, sexy. It was all of those things, but if it was sexy, you didn't play it sexy. Whoa! Now, everyone should move like one giant animal. Bob Fosse always wore hats. Soft hats, derbies, always. And he always said the reason he did that was because he started going bald at age 17. So he constantly had all kinds of hats, or this.
Mr. Fosse said that one of the reasons why he had gloves on is because he didn't like his hands, although he did more hand work than any other choreographer I've ever worked for. That's why everything was turned in and kind of, crooked, is because he was turned in and crooked. He really was, physically. He had a slight bowing of his legs, and but if he could stretch out the best of anybody, if he had to, he'd somehow enforce this long line that didn't really belong to him, but he would just somehow stretch it out, and he would look good, he would look long, he would look elegant. But I think it's his maverick quality that gave him his signature. He loved to break the rules, but still be within the law. Mr. Fosse would try to find people who had a lot of heart. Sometimes he would go with the heart before he would go with the technique. I found him always attracted to the spirit and the soul and the heart.
Bob Fosse had an eclectic taste in music. For 30 years, the man who worked with him on all his films and most of his Broadway shows was the highly acclaimed orchestrator, Ralph Burns.
Music was very important to Bob. It wasn't just the piece or the songs that he was working on in a show. It was the totality of music. The dance and the music, the whole performance had to be one. If the music moves with them, it just helps the dancer. He kept saying, I don't know anything about music. He knew a lot about music. And that's one of the things that made Bob so great.
There really should be a gurney on stage. It's gonna be hard to get it on and off. We should work it out.
But I was thinking, it goes by so fast, the circle. Is there any way we could pull that out just a little bit longer and not have them so spread?
Yeah. Well, no, there's bar rest. There's always
Hold on into the circle longer. Yes, yes, absolutely. They break a little too soon.
They break too soon in
Yeah,
music, and I
yes.
think that's we can fix it if they don't have the troubles.
Okay, great, good. The sensuality that Mr. Fosse is so obviously famous for, I think it transcends both male and female. But when he choreographed for men, he did do specific sort of male virtuoso kind of things, and for women, he did do things that were very feminine. He could dance either part. He could be the best woman I've ever seen and not lose his masculinity. And don't ask me how he did it. I think Mr. Fosse was really a masterful teacher.
No, you just make it strong and getting to your proper part.
As well as a friend and a director and a boss. He was very generous with his talent.
What are you saying, that you don't go to your right partner?
The guy was, without a doubt, quite brilliant. I used to, just stare at the top of his head and wonder where that came from. How did he get these ideas? It's not just the vocabulary of steps, but how he used them, how he put them together, the general structure.
I got steam heat, I got steam heat, I got steam heat, but I need your love to keep away the cold. I got steam heat, I got steam heat, I got steam heat.
Mr. Fosse was an informed person. Sometimes he would come in and have something very specific, but quite often it would get changed and sort of blessed by the dancer and tailored to the dancer. He always did his homework.
And then you come up.
Occasionally there were times where he didn't know what to do next. And many times out of that situation came something that went beyond the norm.
They all learned Fosse's style, and they all danced in his style. But he wanted what they could bring to it, their own inner quality.
Quite often, on his darkest hours, when he was really stuck, would come an inventive moment.
Keep committing. You can never go too far with this stuff. I mean, there's always something else to discover about it. With Mr. Fosse's work, being in the moment is so important, the concentration. And every time Bob did a dance on Broadway, one of the things that seemed to always run in every review was the immense concentration that came out of everybody, and including the ensemble, which was unique.
What Fosse was fascinated with was that each person on stage brought with them a complete, developed, involved, evolved human being and a life.
I thought that was good.
Ultimately, it doesn't matter whether you start on your right foot or your left foot, or you kick your leg once or you kick your leg twice. It's about a point of view. And that is what has to be held on to here.
Good Lord!
Theater is dramatizing something, which doesn't necessarily mean that you want to dramatize the life of Bob Fosse. But there is, if you take the body of work, a story that is told when you look at it.
Razzle dazzle on, and you got a romance.
One of the things about this celebration, this show, is that it is all heart. There's quite a bit of endearing sentiment and tasteful sentiment, along with being jazzy and sexy and fun and witty and all the things that we automatically put with Mr. Fosse.
Right to the end, just like a friend, we try to warn you somehow. You had your way, now you must
like it or not, most of us are given a great cachet of love that's been instilled in us, along with a lot of energy. And that he expressed that, but I think he understood the traps of balance.
In this show, an audience will see dance the way it was in late 40s, 50s, 60s, 80s. They will see all of that from Bob Fosse's work, both as a performer in nightclubs, television, Broadway shows, movies. Music's ready to begin. So it will encompass almost 50 years of dance.
Take out your headset, plug it in. What's your answer, child? Are you gonna come on the best, hottest dance ever? Lean back, relax.
People will not find a story in that sense, but they will definitely feel at the end that something dramatic has happened in the course of the evening, as if there had been one.
Yeah, wait a second. We're not going yet.
Take two. We eliminated.
I'm looking for flow. It should be just like, almost one large ballet.
Just remember, try and anticipate the changes in the transitions and all those little nips and tucks we took yesterday.
But it has to have a real cadence and a flow and a lot of peaks and valleys. So that you really feel that you've discovered the man through his work. It's a celebration, but it's also a sublime entertainment. And not only can you see a Fosse dance a mile away, but you can hear it. The music always has a tremendous amount of rhythm and percussion.
When Bob Fosse started in the 50s and the 40s, when the world was a simpler place, this vocabulary was sunny and wonderful. As we moved into the 60s and the 70s and the world became a much more complicated place, this vocabulary seemed in contrast to the reality of the world. And what Bob did was he used that.
Bob Fosse always said, I want to push people's buttons, whether they like it or not. Because many people could be offended or very uptight about some of the sexual things that he did. But again, he pushed their button. He made them think it because he was very irreverent about what people are supposed to think, supposed to do, supposed to believe. He wanted to erase all of those beliefs that have been imposed on people.
Sometimes you're pro something and sometimes you're anti something. And these feelings of his always came out in his work and what was going on in the times.
His problem solving and his direction always came out of an emotion. When you're doing musical theater, you're actually telling a story. And the dance or the song and dance promotes the story. Occasionally he would do a dance that was just pure dance, but it still embodied the human spirit, the soul, the heart.
All his life, he had an impulse to do ballet, and he was asked to do ballets, and he always turned them down, and he never did a ballet. And what I think we're doing is the ballet he never did.
He was always afraid of sentiment, but for a man who proclaimed to hate ballads, he was quite tender-hearted, and he, oddly enough, did wear his heart on his sleeve.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I worked with him for 45 years. I don't know how he came up with the ideas, what sparked any kind of creative urge in him. I don't think he knew.
I believe nobody really knows just how extraordinary Bob Fosse's work is. And when you put it together, I think people will be astonished.
Jumped so high and clicked his heels.
Mr. Bojangles, it's Fosse at his best. This is a story he wanted to tell about this dancer who was great, an old dancer whose time is done, and yet he's reliving, you know, his whole career. It's a very emotional number to me, just because I think it's so beautiful. It's just a wonderful story. Maybe it was the story of Bob. At the end, you know, you just love it.
Sometimes the definition of inspiration is absolutely right. It's a gift from God. It comes from another source. But he was very good with his gift. He took care of it. He educated it. He gave it everything he had. And it shows.
Bob Fosse wanted to leave his footsteps in the sands of time, and he did. The strut and sizzle of his signature style has made him one of the most original forces in the history of musical theater. It's only fitting that his memory continue to be celebrated for years to come.
Next on Bravo's 5-Star Cinema, Dame Peggy Ashcroft won an Oscar for her role in David Lean's epic A Passage to India. Next on Bravo's 5-Star Cinema. Then Kristen Scott Thomas stars in A Handful of Dust, coming up later tonight on Bravo.